You hear that, and then all the while, Donald Trump has been making the claim that the only reason that he knows that Putin will not escalate things if he says don't escalate is simply out of respect.
I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me.
Поддерживаем все абсолютно. Жутко нравится, как ведет себя Дональд Трамп пока, но мы же понимаем, что...
So who can say in their right mind you didn't see this coming when the negotiations sound like this?
We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on this
position to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this.
you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
playing cards.
But right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
Yeah, you're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
what do you think
You're
about?
gambling with
What do you
World
think
War
about?
III. And
You-
what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
I'm
That's
with
back
all
to you.
respect to your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said
very
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once?
So you hear that, and you hear the ever-swaying position that Trump has taken when it comes down to Putin. And the negotiating line is basically laid out. Whatever current territory Russia has already acquired, they keep. And in exchange, they stop bombing Ukraine.
We're negotiating with Russia, Ukraine, trying to get that horrible situation over with. It's terrible. It's just so terrible. I see pictures that you fortunately don't get to see. You don't want to see them. And that is a killing field. You have young soldiers being killed, thousands a week, and we got to get it over with. It's bad for Russia, and it's bad for Ukraine, and it's bad for us on a humanitarian basis. I've had very good talks with Putin, and I've had not such good talks with Ukraine.
You hear that, and then all the while, Donald Trump has been making the claim that the only reason that he knows that Putin will not escalate things if he says don't escalate is simply out of respect.
You can't be this dumb.
I think he said something along the lines of, he respects me. And so what Trump thought was that in the process of negotiation, since he's having discussions with Zelensky and having discussions with Putin, that Putin might not escalate things.
Right.
Why? Because they're still in the process of negotiation. No deal has been signed just yet, but they're still in that process. So he's kind of going off Vladimir's word.
Good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I want this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't
doesn't
with
matter
me.
for you what-
That
what
wasn't
this
with me.
means. It
That was
wasn't
with
with you.
a guy named Biden who was not a smart person.
What Zelensky was trying to explain to him in that meeting was that you cannot trust Vladimir Putin because he's broken his word before. He will break his word again. And so what Trump thinks is that he hasn't broken his word to me. He's never lied to me. And on top of that, we've been through a whole lot together.
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me.
What?
Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt.
Yeah, do you remember that part? Specifically this part of the meeting.
Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me.
So Putin now, after hearing all of this, he feels emboldened, so much so that he hears that the US is actually backing him ahead of the G7. And then, of course, the intelligence limitations that he put on Ukraine, it was only inevitable that at the end of the day, if Putin's already aware that whatever type of land he acquires before the ceasefire he gets to keep, then in his mind, he must be thinking, well, why don't I just acquire as much as I possibly can before this ceasefire actually takes place? So much so that even after cutting the aid and then being in a position to where Zelensky's ready to now sign for the minerals, he now says there's allegations now going around saying that he wants to see more than just a minerals deal in order for him to restart aid and intel to Ukraine.
You have stupid MAGA brain.
So if you're Putin, how is this not a win?
Well, Willie, as those talks in Saudi Arabia are set to get underway this week, according to U.S. officials, President Trump is signaling behind the scenes that it is not enough for President Zelensky to sign that minerals deal that he was going to sign the day that Oval Office meeting blew everything up, that he has to signal he's serious about peace. From the perspective of President Trump, according to these officials, that includes being clear that he's willing to give up some land and also potentially willing to hold elections and possibly stepping down. That's what it would take from the perspective of President Trump in order to resume military and intelligence sharing. Now, Brian Hughes, spokesperson for the National Security Council, telling me this overnight. As President Trump demonstrated by reading President Zelensky's message at the joint session, the Ukrainians have made positive movement. With meetings in Saudi coming this week, we look forward to hearing more positive movement that will hopefully ultimately end this brutal war and bloodshed. But, Willie, a lot of uncertainty heading into those talks in Saudi Arabia next week as tensions mount between the United States and Ukraine, and, of course, its European allies as well, with Russia, as Molly just laid out, really stepping up its bombardments. We'll delve into all of that today coming up on the program.
And so much of this burden being placed on Ukraine, the victim of the invasion 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's the part that everyone actually forgets, that they're the victims in all of this. They didn't ask anyone to come across their border. Putin's already taken some of their land. For that, in 2014, they already started that entire process. And the entire reason that the deterrent was given up.
Ever since this war started, there's been a lot of concern about Russia's nuclear arsenal and a lot of discussion about Ukraine's lack thereof. Why doesn't Ukraine have nuclear weapons? Well, it used to. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, it left nuclear arms scattered across former Soviet states, and Ukraine was one of them. Suddenly, it became the third largest nuclear power in the world, behind the United States and Russia. Ukraine inherited nearly 5,000 nuclear weapons from Moscow. Some of those were the kinds of long-range nukes that could wipe out cities. Some members of Ukraine's parliament recognized at the time that nuclear weapons gave them leverage. They didn't want to give that up. But officials eventually relented under international pressure, especially from the U.S. That's when negotiations began to denuclearize Ukraine. The U.S., the U.K., and Russia were at the heart of these talks, convincing Ukraine to return the nukes to Russia. And in 1994, those four countries signed what is now known as the Budapest Memorandum. They promised that none of those nations would use force or threats against Ukraine, and they promised to respect their sovereignty and existing borders.
So now they're being told it's not just the minerals. You have to now be willing to step down, which he already said he would do. You have to be willing to give up your land. And then on top of that, you have to give up your resources as well. Whereas this entire thing could have been ended if you just talk to Putin in the same way you talk to Zelensky and tell Putin, back off. So you hear those announcements, then something like this happens.
Russia is pushing ahead with its large-scale airstrikes on Ukraine. At least 20 people were killed and dozens injured in missile and drone strikes overnight. Ukrainian officials say 11 people, including children, were killed in an attack in the eastern Donetsk region. 9 more were killed in attacks on several frontline towns and in the northeastern region of Kharkiv. The assaults took place just 24 hours after Russia hit Ukrainian energy facilities with dozens of missiles and drones. This recent wave of Russian strikes comes ahead of plans for Ukraine and the US to hold peace talks next week, following a pause on military aid and intelligence sharing between the two countries.
Люди у нас погибли. 2 соседа, женщина в 3-й квартире и в 4-м подъезде. Страшно это все, конечно.
Ні, фізично постраждалих немає. Є люди, яким просто, можливо, потрібна психологічна допомога. Перемикалися. Діти всі живі, слава Богу.
Ну, вроде бы все живы,
Вроде бы нет. Но как будет завтра?
Завтра будемо вже
Когда это
прибирати,
было,
дивитися.
мы на первом, вот в коридоре, у нас стены толстые, 80 сантиметров, мы все там находились. Ну, никто раненых, никто не пострадал.
Нет,
Шок, можливо, там, да,
Просто мы реально вот
психологічно,
так
да.
испугались. Дети, там целая куча детей, вот так все их накрыли, как черепашка. И всё.
But hold on. On the Russians, while all of this is going on, the Russians are absolutely loving it. They're blaring this on Russian TV, how good Donald Trump is, that he cut off their intel. He cut off the intel to Ukraine, that he cut off the aid to Ukraine. So he's basically doing exactly what it is that the Russians want him to do. This puts them in a perfect position to end this war. And you know how they want to end this war, right?
I wonder.
Включили в них, приостановили оружие. Там убрали даже с сайта соглашения у них, так сказать, с Зеленским. То есть надо идти сегодня, внимание, есть окно возможностей. Но ведь прекрасная вещь, значит, информацию закрыли, спутники отключили у них, приостановили оружие. Там убрали даже с сайта соглашения у них, так сказать, с Зеленским. То есть надо идти сегодня, конечно, по тому треку, который предлагается. А трек предлагается вплоть до духовных вещей. Там вышел этот с крестом на лбу вице-президент. Да, это
Марко Рубио, госсекретарь.
это возможно было представить эту до Трампа? Да это вообще невозможно. Традиционные ценности. Это серьезная вещь. Что, мы не будем это поддерживать? Будем, конечно. Обязательно.
Мы поддерживаем все абсолютно. Жутко нравится, как ведет себя Дональд Трамп пока, но мы же понимаем, что на
Hold on, did y'all read that? They are loving everything Donald Trump is doing. He's walking directly in line with what they need. So they're saying to themselves, why not advance in the opportunity he's providing us? And then you hear what they said, that before Donald Trump, we would have never even imagined anything like this. They're talking about Joe Biden, that Joe Biden, because he was so difficult with them, that they wouldn't have made headway like how they have now when it came down to a different president. So this is our chance. They have no intention of ever stopping this. The only way this ends is when Ukraine is no more. And unfortunately, Zelensky knows this. This is what he was trying to convey in that meeting, that even though he might say, we're going to do a ceasefire for now, it's only a ceasefire because he's lost so many troops. He needs to reload his stock. And then once that's all done, he's going to start again. And now if he starts again, what are you going to do? Just call another ceasefire? This is exactly what he was saying when he said, we need security assurances before we sign any kind of deal, because we've made verbal agreements before and he's broken them. We've signed things and he's broken them.
Those four countries signed what is now known as the Budapest Memorandum. They promised that none of those nations would use force or threats against Ukraine, and they promised to respect their sovereignty and existing borders.
Every step of the way, every time we say, okay, we're not going to do any more, he's broken these agreements. Either give this man his nuclear arsenal back.
Why would you do that?
Or put some boots on the ground. That's your deterrent. But all the while, Donald Trump has other concerns because protesters, they actually vandalized his golf course, of which he's currently costing the taxpayer tens of millions of dollars for him to do all these golf rounds and for him to take all these vacations. While the world is burning around him, he's out golfing. What's your honest opinion on this one? Should the U.S. still continue to fund Ukraine? Have they shelled out billions, as some people think, even though it's actually arms that they've been sending? Should Donald Trump be more aggressive to Putin, the same way he's been with Zelensky? Or Zelensky has no cards, so therefore, you're the weaker army? Give it up. Whatever your thoughts are, leave them in the comment section. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like, and I will see you again on the next one. Be easy, y'all.
Those four countries signed what is now known as the Budapest Memorandum. They promised that none of those nations would use force or threats against Ukraine, and they promised to respect their sovereignty and existing borders.